Really good.
Okay, so we're live here with Larry Klayman. Larry, thank you for being with me.
Jason, thank you for inviting me.
And, you know, I apologize for the hurried nature of the setup here. Our viewers who are joining us did not mean to rush like that, but it's been a crazy day.
Me too.
We're here in an undisclosed location that we won't discuss, but we are live.
Mark Levin in a bunker underground in a nondescript building.
That's right. That's right. It's really an honor to be with you, Larry. And, you know, you and I met at the hearing, one of the first public hearings for the Bundy trial. I was there. I heard some testimony that I found very shocking. There's just been a verdict. You must be very pleased.
I'm very pleased. I wrote a column today at worldnetdaily.com. You can also find it on our website at ClyvenBundyDefenseFund.org and also FreedomWatchUSA.org. And it really equates what the Bundys did in standing up to a tyrannical federal government to what the colonialists did the years leading up to 1776 against the tyranny of King George III, who also would bust into people's property, assault colonialists and their families, rape and pillage women, steal property. I mean, that's what happened here. So I gravitated to this case 4 years ago when someone asked me to meet Cliven Bundy and his family, and I fell in love with the family. I mean, they are true American patriots.
And so kind.
They believe in the Constitution, they believe in the rule of law, and they're willing to risk everything for their principles as our founding fathers did. So you got to witness that in court.
Yeah. Yeah, they really are very nice. I mean, meeting them, seeing them, hearing their whole story.
Right.
I can't really understand people who are on the other side of this. Now, at Crowdsource the Truth, we do have a lot of people who take opposing views, and we welcome that, of course. But in this case, I really feel like, irrespective of what the Bundys did, I don't even want to, you know, put out my opinion on whether I agree or disagree with their interpretation of the Constitution. The fact that they were thrown in jail for 1 year and 10 months without a trial, no bail offered, you know, this is just such a huge violation of their constitutional rights. Everyone needs to be very concerned about this. The federal government can just scoop you up and stick you in lockbox.
Doesn't matter whether you're conservative, liberal, moderate, Republican, Democrat, whatever. I mean, we are at risk here. And it depends on who the president is and who the administration is to some extent, but also my alma mater, the Department of Justice, has become very corrupt. It's become the Department of Injustice. And I saw that even as a young lawyer, and that's why ultimately I founded Judicial Watch, and I left Judicial Watch to run for the Senate in 2003 in Florida. And when I came out, I started Freedom Watch, which now does the work that Judicial Watch used to do in terms of complex litigation. Judicial Watch mostly tries to get documents. We're bringing hard-hitting cases and defending hard-hitting defendants like the Bundys to try to bring about justice.
Right. Now, I don't know that much about the details of what happened with the founding of Judicial Watch and all of that, and I think most people have a fairly positive view, or I should say most people who watch Crowdsource the Truth and who want things like hidden emails about yoga and Chelsea's wedding to come forward. We want Judicial Watch to be doing what it's doing, but can you talk a little bit about what happened?
And I taught those guys. They were working under me. Tom Fitton was a young assistant at the time. He had told me that he had graduated from George Washington. He hadn't, but when I left, I wanted to have someone put in like Bob Barr, who we worked with to impeach the president at the time, Bill Clinton, because I felt that Judicial Watch should have a lawyer running it. Tom Fitton's not a lawyer. So what they did when I left is that they focused mostly on getting documents, freedom of information. And that's valuable. To get documents are good.
Yeah.
You need documents to play cards, okay, in effect, with the government. But when you play cards, you got to play to win, and you got to put money down on the table. I'm being somewhat using analogies here. And that's what I do. I'm a trial lawyer 40 years. So it's different. Freedom Watch is different than Judicial Watch. Is that when I was at Judicial Watch, we would bring these hard-hitting lawsuits, racketeering lawsuits, stockholder derivative lawsuits, violation of constitutional rights, rights to privacy, as with the Filegate scandal and things like that. Judicial Watch does some litigation, but not much, because they really don't have an experienced trial lawyer. So it's complementary. Judicial Watch gets documents. We get documents too, but we're bringing these hard-hitting cases.
Where's the funding for Judicial Watch coming from? We've heard they've got a $35 million a year budget.
Well, I left them with $20 million in the bank when I left to run for the U.S. Senate, so they had a lot of money to work with.
I see.
And eventually they were able to use that money to raise more money. You know, you need to have money to make money. And I don't know exactly what they've got, but you know, in today's day and age, although we need obviously the contributions, and if people want to help us, they can go to freedomwatchusa.org. You can do it more cheaply than you used to do it, because pleadings are filed, you know, by computer on the internet. You don't have to travel as much. I'm always around the country. I'm in Washington, D.C., I'm in Florida, I'm in California. Florida is my native state.
Nevada, of course.
And Nevada, of course. So, yeah, I mean, we could use more resources, we could ramp up, but we can do the job.
Right, right. Now, so when you were with the Department of Justice, you were a U.S. attorney? What was your role there, or do I have that right?
I was a prosecutor and a defense lawyer. I had started my career in Miami, Florida for a litigation law firm, Blackwell and Walker. I left after 2.5 years, and I went with the Justice Department, which to me, you know, was the pinnacle of what I thought I could do to try to change the world at that time.
Right.
And I was in the Antitrust Division, and I represented 4 federal agencies: the Food and Drug Administration, the Federal Trade Commission, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and the Federal Reserve Board. And then I transferred to the AT&T trial section, and that was, I think, the most enjoyable. I was on the trial team that broke up AT&T, that created competition in the communications industry. That's why we have our cell phones today. We have all this competition. Right. Because we broke up that monopoly.
And there's been some chatter about that sort of trust-busting kind of thing maybe coming back with some of these internet giants. Google, Amazon seem to control a huge amount of the internet and now retail. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, there's too much concentration right now, and you need that competition. You know, I always said when I started my law firm, after I left Blackwell and Walker, because there were some interim years before I started Judicial Watch, if you really want a good set of clothes, go to a boutique. Okay, if you want an average set of clothes, go to Macy's. Okay, so usually the finest lawyers leave these big law firms. I had been with a big law firm in Florida. Interim years I went to Justice, and then I went with a small international trade law firm, and then I started my own law firm in Washington. But I used to say when I competed, you know, you're hiring a boutique in Larry Klayman. And I also would use an analogy. At that time, our military hadn't won wars for several years after Vietnam, and I'm very proud of this country and our military, and I represent many military families. But I used to say, if you want the Israeli Air Force, you can hire me. We get the planes while they're on the ground.
So many people may not realize that you've got a lawsuit going to try to remove Robert Mueller as the special counsel in this Russiagate investigation. Can you talk to us?
That's right, and that again delineates the difference between Judicial Watch today and what I do at Freedom Watch, because they'll get documents, but we actually brought a lawsuit to have him removed. And I filed what are known as Office of Professional Responsibility complaints and Inspector General complaints at the Justice Department. Special Counsel Mueller works under the authority of the Department of Justice. It's clear that he's been leaking grand jury information from the start in a very partisan political way. We know his prosecutors either voted for Clinton or donated to Clinton by and large. And what they're doing is they're trying to destroy the president, whether or not they ever indict him or forward a report to Congress for impeachment proceedings. They're trying to destroy his reputation, his family's reputation, the people around him, before anything ever happens. You know, it's very, quote, clever, but it's also criminal. So we asked the OPR and IG, as they're abbreviated, to conduct an investigation. They wouldn't even acknowledge that we filed a complaint, so I then filed a complaint. It's called a complaint for writ of mandamus in the federal court in Washington, D.C., to ask a judge to order them to conduct the investigation. And if they confirm what I say, and I know that it's true, the Justice Department would then have to dismiss Mueller as special counsel. So that case is in progress. Now, there's an interesting little catch to that. Really interesting. The judge that it was assigned to randomly is named Amy Berman Jackson. She's the most politically, frankly, corrupt judge on that court. I call it like it is. I don't care what they
I like that
think,
about
okay?
you.
And I had her in a prior case involving Benghazi because, again, this differentiates Freedom Watch from Judicial Watch. I brought a lawsuit for the parents of Ty Woods and Sean Smith, who died with Ambassador Chris Stevens, against Hillary Clinton for wrongful death and for defamation. And what we allege in the complaint is that Hillary Clinton, at a minimum, was negligent in using this private server, which the FBI, even Comey, admitted was hacked by at least 5 hostile forces. And what we're saying is that gave rise to the terrorists learning the coordinates of the ambassador, which then gave rise to the attack which killed our client's sons, their Gold Star parents. In addition, Hillary Clinton told them that it was just an attack by a bunch of Muslims who were going for a walk in the woods and were mad about a video of
YouTube video.
Muhammad,
Right.
When at the same time she was telling her daughter and the president of Egypt that it was Al-Qaeda. And she told this to our clients, and when our clients repeated what they had been told, she called them liars in the media because she wanted to protect herself, when her presidential campaign. So she defamed them. She has no immunity. It was occurring while she was a private citizen. We brought this lawsuit, and Amy Berman Jackson, an Obama appointee, dismissed the case on the eve of Memorial Day. Can you imagine that?
Wow, what a slap in the face.
Yeah. Gold Star parents. Now, she's Harvard educated, both undergrad and law school.
That's got to be deliberate.
She's smart. Yeah, it was deliberate. It was basically to stick it to our clients, to curry favor with Hillary Clinton, hoping that maybe if Hillary was elected, she would be put up even on a higher court.
Right.
So that's Amy Berman Jackson. Now, here's the way Washington works, and you asked a good question, Jason. I know I'm being a little long-winded.
No.
But the Paul Manafort prosecution was also assigned to Amy Berman Jackson of Mueller.
Right.
Manafort put up $11 million in bail to get out. He's not a flight risk. I mean, that's ridiculous. No more than the Bundys were. The judge would not let him out on his own recognizance, confined him to house arrest with his partner Rick Gates during Thanksgiving. They're still under house arrest. Then she put a gag order on Manafort and Gates, so they can't even comment on their prosecution when they're being ripped to shreds on MSNBC, CNN, the New York Times, Washington Post, and elsewhere. Now that's unconstitutional. That's a violation of First Amendment rights. So she's tying their hands behind their backs. So there you see the political prejudice yet again. And add insult to injury, she then is assigned, allegedly randomly, this case that we brought with Mueller. Before the complaint was even filed, she dismisses the complaint, claiming that we can't show standing, which is false. So I have it up on appeal to the D.C. Court of Appeals, the D.C. Circuit, and I'm confident it'll be sent back. But this is the kind of thing that we fight these days, and this is why we need, the financial support, because we're up against a judiciary, particularly in Washington, D.C.
Right.
It's 95% now Clinton and Obama appointed, ultra-leftist, partisan, and it gets back to Judicial Watch, too. They got some documents, but when did they get the documents? Years after the fact.
Yeah.
These Clinton-Obama judges slow-rolled these FOIA requests, so little to nothing came out during the Obama administration and during the Clinton campaign.
Right.
And this is why we are fighting constantly in court. Now, get back to Bundy. We got a good result there, but we also got that result with an Obama appointee, a judge that was recommended by Harry Reid. And for the first trial of the defendants, because the case was broken up into 3 parts. There were 18 defendants. There were other defendants other than Klayman and his sons that were tried first.
Right.
She made every ruling in favor of the prosecution. She rubber-stamped everything, so much so that the Las Vegas Review-Journal, which is mainstream, the community newspaper, said the prosecutors have a friend in Gloria Navarro. And what did she do with Klayman when they were indicted and his sons? She threw him in prison, wouldn't give him bail, threw him in solitary confinement, if you can believe that.
In a for-profit prison.
In a for-profit prison. She then denied speedy trial rights to all the defendants because the government lied and said they have to try all the 18 defendants at one time, and that's complex. They later changed their mind, of course, quote unquote, at the end and wanted it broken up into 3 parts. So there was no reason not to have a speedy trial. She denied my right of counsel to come in as counsel of record. I, assisted on the case as best I could by advising and on the outside and working with Ryan and others to help them. I did other things. I filed lawsuits in Washington, D.C. to get documents under the Freedom of Information Act. I also filed OPR and IG investigations. I did a lot of different things. And to the day that she dismissed the indictment this Monday, I was still fighting legally to get into the case because most of the case hadn't been tried. There were only a few witnesses up to that point. So Navarro, when she dismissed this, really did it to save her own skin because she didn't want to go down with a sinking ship.
Right.
Her reputation had basically been damaged to such a degree that even the hometown newspaper said, frankly, that she had been a disgrace in violating the constitutional rights of the defendant. So when, in the trial, the early stages, we learned that the FBI had lied on the stand, that the BLM had lied on the stand, the documents had been shredded, documents had been destroyed, that there were snipers out at the ranch before anything ever happened.
Video footage suppressed?
Yes, there was the former U.S. Attorney Dan Bogdan out there with the acting U.S. Attorney Myray, who tried these cases with his two colleagues, Dan Sheets, and a woman, I forget her name, it's a Muslim name, Ahmad, who was with them. They were out there trying to set up a situation where they could later indict the Bundys. It was an entrapment. It was a setup. And we know there were snipers out there surrounding the Bundy ranch. They lied about that. Myra got up and said, no, this is a fishing expedition. He lied to the court. And then a whistleblower comes along by the name of Larry Wooten, by the grace of God, a BLM individual, and his conscience got to him. And he had seen that there was actually a kill list for the Bundys. Now, even if it was a joke, I mean, it shows you where they're coming from.
It's certainly no joke. This is a federal agency.
I'm saying it's not a joke. You're right. There were targets with their faces on them on the wall at BLM facilities with X's on them as if they had been killed.
Wow.
Their faith was being disparaged because they were Mormon. They were being called retards, subhuman, things like that. This guy wrote an 8-page, single-spaced report of what was going on. He gave it to Myray, the lead counsel prosecutor for the government. Myray buried it and, in fact, had Wooten fired, in effect. Of course, you can't fire a federal agent, but, you know, put to the side.
Right.
Okay? All this came out. And at the time that the judge, Navarro, ordered this was dismissed with prejudice, she hadn't even put Wooten on the stand yet. We had actually asked them to do that. I had written a pleading for Ryan, who's representing himself sui juris, pro se, and you know, we have a record that we wanted him on the stand as well. But why is it, and you sat there during that proceeding, the judge ripped the prosecutors for lying to her. The judge, she ripped the FBI for lying on the witness stand, but she laid off of the BLM, okay, at that time. And why was that? And it finally dawned on me about 4 or 5 hours later.
She didn't want this whistleblower getting to the stand.
Well, there was that, but also she had been recommended to the bench by Harry Reid, former senator, corrupt mafia-connected senator from Nevada. Harry Reid was reported to have been working with his son to sell the land out from under the Bundys. Harry Reid had put as in charge of the Bureau of Land Management, recommending to Obama to appoint him an individual by the name of Neil Corrin, who was his chief of staff. He had his own yes man at the Bureau of Land Management when this attack on the Bundy Ranch occurred by these federal goons.
Harry Reid had his own yes man.
Harry Reid. So she was protecting Harry Reid, who got her appointment as federal judge, and who she looks to. Reid is still powerful. Reid is a force still powerful in the Democratic establishment.
Absolutely.
Okay. He's like the Wizard of Oz in Nevada. He's controlling things behind the curtain. And she doesn't want to anger him because ultimately she would like to go to the Ninth Circuit or some other higher appointment, undoubtedly. And she's, in her own mind, thinks she's a candidate for the Supreme Court. You know, I like Latin people. I'm from Miami, and I've sued Castro. I represent the Latin community, so I don't mean this in any way this way, but a Latina woman is a very high choice, you know, politically, to make their way to a higher judicial appointment in today's world if you're a Democrat.
Right.
And if you're a Republican too. So the dynamics of this thing are fascinating. They're tragic, but it ended well. And for whatever reason, even if her motives were not pure, Judge Navarro did what she had to do to save her own standing as a judge, but it benefited the Bundys.
Ultimately,
Ultimately, yeah.
And there's still obviously more unravel in that case.
Right.
Other people that are in jail due to plea agreements and things like this. But, you know, it really is staggering to me, the degree of corruption. Just saying, oh, you know, there's corruption in the government. Yes, but when you lay it out the way that you have, when you see the number of people that are involved, the depth and the breadth to which this corruption permeates all of these organizations, and the activities of, I mean, of course, we're talking about the Bureau of Land Management, the FBI. So much has gone on in Vegas in 2017 with the October shooting, and the FBI figures into that.
Interesting question there.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, one of the reasons the federal agents, I call them goons, were forced to leave ultimately, okay, was the sheriff's presence there. It was Sheriff Gillespie.
Lombardo. Oh, Gillespie.
Lombardi was his deputy. Okay. Now, Klayman feels strongly, and I do too, that they should have done more to prevent it from getting to that point. The federal agents shouldn't even have been allowed on the property because the land, legally speaking, and I believe that Klayman is correct, belongs to the people of Nevada, not the federal government. We can talk about that a little bit later. So therefore the federal government was trespassing, not Klayman. But Lombardo, in prior trial, lied under oath, claiming that the Bundys and their supporters threatened the federal agents at gunpoint. That never happened. And that was the significance of the surveillance cameras that were hidden.
Oh, they would have shown.
They would have shown
didn't
that that was not the case, you see. And so when Klayman did a press conference the other day, you were there.
Yes.
He invited Sheriff Lombardo to appear and to say his piece, and he said, "You better protect me now. You've lied under oath before. Make the situation right. Don't allow, you know, federal goons onto my property again, in effect, that I've ranched for, our family's ranched for 150 years. It's, you know, they have rights of grazing and water rights. So that's important. But Lombardo has covered up the Paddock mass
shooting,
murder.
right.
Yeah, and I have a theory on that, just quickly. We can talk about
share
it later. Is that I believe Paddock was likely a federal agent. And one of your colleagues came up with a theory which I think makes sense, is that he may have been somehow involved in a sting operation on ISIS and, you know, went south. And I don't think the federal government, you know, wanted those people killed. I don't even think they did that. But they're covering it up because one of theirs committed the massacre, and Lombardo is participating in that cover-up, because we know nothing to this day. It's clearly a cover-up. And I've seen that before in my legal practice. It's not that unusual that a federal agent gets in trouble and they cover it up.
I think you're talking about Laura Loomer, who mentioned that on InfoWars the other day, and I think she's right. There's a lot to it. Jake Morphonios, maybe you have, maybe you haven't seen, has also linked Paddock to a pharmacy elsewhere in Nevada. The owner of that pharmacy co-owned a vehicle with Paddock. Both of their names were, you know, on the ownership documents of the vehicle, and there was that guy. His name is Adam. His last name escapes me right now, but he was indicted on some sort of opiate scam going through the pharmacy. So there seems to be quite a lot going on with Stephen Paddock. There's the Paradise Ranch in Henderson. There's a Paradise Ranch in the Philippines. There's suspicious activity going on at this Paradise Ranch. A lot of people have suggested maybe child trafficking is involved. Stephen Paddock's father, of course, was on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted.
Well, and they grabbed all the evidence out of his house after the massacre. The feds cleaned the house out, and they didn't want that on the market. But the bottom line here is Lombardo is involved in this cover-up, okay? And that's criminal in and of itself. So,
will these guys ever see justice, Larry? I mean, these cops, these prosecutors who are just the biggest criminals around.
I'm going to do everything I can to have that happen. We're not done yet. We need a declaratory judgment that the land belongs to the people of Nevada. Klayman is considering, and others as well, including his sons, malicious prosecution lawsuits, civil rights lawsuits, to bring about justice. We have the Office of Professional Responsibility and IG investigation teed up. You know, I lobbied Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, for a year to conduct a review. He finally agreed when Navarro first declared a mistrial on December 20th. Later, of course, she dismissed the indictment with prejudice. And I hope to work with him finally. I'm going to Washington next week, and I want to see if I can sit down with him or his people. I'm going to the House Judiciary Committee, I'm going to the Senate Judiciary Committee. I would like to have the Bundys meet the president. The president's been very supportive of the Bundys and ranchers in the West. He denationalized parts of national monuments in Utah. He's about ready to do that in Nevada as well. The president understands what went on. And here's the great irony, Jason. This prosecutorial abuse that, I mean, massive, that the Bundys experienced, the president's experiencing the same thing.
That's right.
There's an affinity here. And he can understand what's going on. And one of the reasons I love this president, you know, I loved Reagan. Every time I go out to Simi Valley and to the library, I tear over. But I frankly think Trump's going to be even better president than Reagan. I mean that. Now, he may be coarse. He may say things that people find offensive sometimes. But you know what? We live in a different age. And people are tired of the Bush family types that, you know, everything is la-di-da, la-di-da. You know, Annie Hall. No
on
problem.
camera.
Right. But underneath the table,
Horrible.
sleazier than you can imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, the Bush family is sleazy.
Right.
Okay? Rally. They put on a good face. I like Jeb. I don't associate Jeb with the rest of the family. But you know,
we may disagree.
You're raising your eyebrows. But he would not have made a good president.
No.
I mean, you know, look, right after the 2000 elections, you know, Bush wants to have a sit-down tea and crumpets with the Clintons, you know, and they covered everything up, and now they're the best friends, and it's part of the president's club, and the rest of the American people, you know, they can be damned, and you know, we are the American nobility, you are the rabble, okay? But Trump gets down at ground zero. He calls it like it is, and he understands the problems in the judiciary, in the legal system. It is corrupt to the core, Jason. It's corrupt to the core, and I've lived it for 40 years.
It is. And we can talk Bushes and Clintons in a moment, but you're raising so many points that I want to address. I think it goes even beyond Mr. Trump, you know, feeling the pain of the Bundys. Obviously, in your profession, there's a term called pattern and practice. And we're seeing that in terms of manufacturing evidence, bringing some allegation, presuming that allegation is basically a foregone conclusion, and then just, you know, sort of dogpiling on top of that, you know. The whole thing with the armed standoff, whenever anyone tries to have a discussion with me, at least, about the Bundy situation, the armed standoff is presumed to be a foregone conclusion. But you've said, and Klayman has said, that this was manufactured by the media, the concept of an armed standoff.
Yeah.
It really was just agents
The
kind of
Bundys
invading
never
their
carried
space.
weapons.
Never.
And that was
carried
one of the
weapons.
lies on the witness stand. They bring in a BLM agent that said that, if you want a little humor here, that Ryan had a bulge in his pocket, you know. And, you know, if she'd been better looking, I might have thought it might have been another reason. It turns out it was a cell phone. And she claimed it was a gun.
Wow.
Okay. You ever see that Woody Allen movie, Take the Money and Run?
I did. It's a very funny
When he
movie.
goes in to rob a bank and he gives the teller a note and she can't read it and she says, this is a holdup, I have a gub, and he says, no, it's clearly a gun. And then they argue over that, and by the time it's over, he's arrested and thrown in prison. It's as absurd as that.
It is. I was so impressed with Ryan Bundy in the courtroom there, I would have thought that he's been to law school.
Ryan is a brilliant guy, and so is Ammon. Ammon had lawyers, so he didn't speak. Mel and Davey are also very smart. The family is super smart now, and I visited Klayman at least 25 times in prison. You know, I spent weeks with him. Okay, I learned from him. He's got a tremendous sense of the way things work. He's extremely bright. He talks like a rancher. Okay, and the sons are more traditionally educated, you know, in the way they talk. But Klayman is brilliant. He's a brilliant guy, and he's also very articulate. But Ryan was better than every other lawyer in that courtroom.
Absolutely.
And he stood up to the judge.
Yeah.
The rest of them rolled over. You see all those other lawyers in the courtroom, they get court appointments from the judges of that court. Their livelihood depends on it. And they rolled over a lot. And thank God that the FBI got caught lying and BLM got caught lying. The federal public defenders did a good job in going through the evidence. They were representing Ryan Payne, the so-called militia person. Mm-hmm. You know, by the way, there's nothing wrong in being in a militia. It's in our Second Amendment.
Right.
As long as you don't violate the law. And it's not a dirty word, militia.
We're supposed to maintain a militia.
Right, and you have Second Amendment rights. So Ryan stood up to the judge, but he was also very likable and very respectful and very patient. And the jury loved him. And after the judge declared the mistrial the first time on December 20th, the jurors were polled after that. 9 of the 12 said they were going to acquit, even just on a few days of testimony that had taken place over the weeks, because there were lots of starting and stopping.
Yeah.
Because of all the stuff that was being uncovered that hadn't been produced. And one of them ran over and hugged Ryan. And then just the other day, last Monday, when she dismissed the indictment with prejudice, 7 of them came to support the Bundys, which is amazing. And this tells you something, Jason, is that, you know, I have never lost a jury trial. Maybe I've just been lucky, okay? I've lost some judge trial cases, particularly if they're Clinton or Obama appointees. But I believe in the jury system. The Founding Fathers were brilliant, and they genuinely try to do the right thing. And they have a sixth sense, and they're not colored by, generally by, you know, their desire to get a higher appointment by feathering the nest and scratching the backs of the people that put them in power, like the judges are.
And you know, they say luck is the residue of design, Larry, so I think it might go beyond simple luck. You've reminded me that I got a question from retired Special Agent Robin Gritz, who perhaps you've seen on Crowdsource The Truth. Robin was essentially pushed out of the FBI by corrupt agents. She wanted to do the right thing. They didn't like that, so they started bringing all kinds of legal actions against her, you know, positioning her so that the legal system could be used against her. She wanted me to ask you what you think about John Carlin, formerly being Mueller's chief of staff and counsel, and then becoming the chief of the Department of Justice's National Security Branch, and you know, with the Trump Russian urination dossier and the FISA things that are happening.
The urination dossier?
Yes,
Okay, yeah.
that highly credible document from BuzzFeed or whoever,
Right.
Fusion GPS and all of these. Let's talk a bit about some of this, how these political operative firms are
I
playing
don't know
a role.
Carlin in particular. I know that Mueller packed, you know, the special counsel with partisans that hate Trump. It was even revealed last night by Sarah Carter of The Hill and Sinclair that this guy, Andrew Weissman, met with the AP while he was a Justice Department lawyer, head of the fraud section, discussing an investigation of Manafort, and then he was brought over to Special Counsel Mueller's team. That's totally unethical, and he should be also disciplined, if not prosecuted, for that. But I have had experience with representing FBI agents, and I understand what this person, this caller, Robin, is talking about. I represented Robert Wright and John Vincent, who I was introduced to, special agents, counterterrorism task force in the Chicago field office. Before 9/11, that was the premier anti-terrorism task force field office. And Dave Shippers, who was the impeachment manager at Clinton, introduced me to them. They were investigating Saudi money laundering, and they were stopped in the United States. There was literally also a war in the United States between Israeli Mossad and operatives of Hamas and Hezbollah here. They were killing each other at the time.
When was that?
And that's been covered up in the years leading up to 9/11.
Wow.
Yeah, because there was a presence here. There were cells here, and the Israelis basically were trying to get rid of those cells. They were operating here with our consent, but they didn't want it known that we were sanctioning, you know, some assassinations here. Granted, assassinations that benefited the world, frankly. But I'm not advocating killing people, but terrorists, okay, that's another thing.
Right.
But to make the long story short, these FBI agents were, they attempted to drum them out of the FBI because they had been working with a Muslim agent who refused to be wired to go in to get information from these Saudi money launderers.
A Muslim FBI agent.
And he told them Muslims don't rat out other Muslims.
You're an FBI agent.
Yeah, and they went public with that.
Wow.
And in addition to that, their investigations were quashed because they were getting too close to Saudis who had some connection, it was believed, to the Bushes. Okay, and
Bandar, bin Sultan.
Yeah, So, to make a long story short, I represented them and eventually saved their careers and their security clearances. But they attempted, and Mueller came in and was part of this, trying to drum them out of the FBI after 9/11. We tried to come forward with it. So he is not a man of integrity. He's corrupt. He's sleazy.
Well, and of course, he oversaw the FBI during the years after 9/11 when the 28-page document from Bob Graham's Senate Intelligence Committee was suppressed.
Right. And the way they tried to drum one of the agents out was they ponied up a phony charge that he had sexually harassed some woman in the Middle East while they were riding the camel that he kissed other FBI agent on the cheek. Okay. Now, by today's standards, that's rather mild, I might say. But, and we don't know whether it was consensual or not, but this was phony, and they created that to try to drum him out.
And we come back to this pattern in practice where they just come up with some allegation and use that. We've heard, actually, Robin Gritz has said that the process is the punishment, simply bringing this charge against someone and causing them to have to go through the legal system and hire a lawyer and defend themselves, just as Trump is being dragged.
Well, you remember, what was her name? Colleen Rowley, who had the computer of the 17th terrorist for 9/11.
Okay.
And her supervisors prevented her from going through the computer, which might have stopped 9/11. And then she, as a whistleblower, came forward and they tried to drum her out until public opinion turned against the FBI, and then they gave her an award. You know, the FBI there are good line agents. I mean, there are, but the people that run the FBI, by and large, they're political hacks.
Well, I think it goes beyond that. It really seems like we're at a point now with the FBI, really an unprecedented moment, I think, in the history of the country. We need sort of a very transparent and very comprehensive cleaning out of the FBI. You know, the fact that Andrew McCabe and James Comey and before him Robert Mueller are all so involved in this investigation into the Clintons. Of course, you've been pursuing, from a legal standpoint, the Clintons for many, many years, so you're very familiar with their pattern and practice, which is essentially control the Attorney General, control the lead investigator, control the outcome of the investigation.
Well, and you've got this mutual assured destruction ideology practice in Washington. Don't gore my ox and I won't gore yours when I'm in power. And at the end of the Clinton years, when we had the Clintons dead to rights with an individual by the name of Peter Paul, people can read about it in the book that I wrote, Whores, W-H-O-R-E-S, Why I Came to Fight the Establishment. You can get it on Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble. It's my autobiography. But, you know, immediately after W won the election, I went to John Ashcroft, the Attorney General, and I said, look, we've got all these cases against the Clinton administration for Privacy Act violations with FBI files and Travelgate and Chinagate and everything. Why don't we settle them? It wouldn't do it. They continued, Justice Department lawyers, to defend the Clintons in a Republican George W. Bush administration, just like Ashcroft is now doing in what he's been doing.
What is Ashcroft doing now?
I mean, what Sessions is doing.
Oh, Sessions, right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And this is the rule in Washington. You protect me and I'll protect you when we're in power.
Right.
And there's this cabal, and the Democrats and Republicans, the establishments, I mean, they're taking it all to the bank. They're stuffing money into their pockets. There's never a recession in Washington. It continues to grow. It's a scandal in and of itself. The rest of the country's on its knees in 2008, but Washington continues to prosper.
And do you think we'll see justice? You said to me in a private conversation that you don't think that anything legally will happen to the Clintons, but why is that?
No, because I've had too much experience here. You know, it's what Sessions did, and let me back up a little bit.
Sure.
Why has Sessions buried his head in the sand? Sessions was on the transition team of the Trump. He was on the campaign and the transition team. We know that Fusion GPS dossier was used to get a wiretap on the Trump Tower.
Yeah.
And who did they likely have within the net of that wiretap?
Maybe Sessions.
Trump, his family, his associates, and Sessions. We know that Sessions came before Congress, and frankly, he didn't tell the truth about meeting with Russian ambassador. So it was benign. It means nothing. It wasn't a crime, but he wasn't truthful under oath.
Was that a mistake, or did he deliberately?
No, I think he deliberately did it.
Why?
Because he thought somehow he's kind of like a sissy, actually, you know, and he doesn't want to be involved in anything. He's a former senator, you know. They just want to walk around prancing around in their $3,000 suits and Senate cufflinks. So he doesn't want to dirty himself. You know, he's a very nice man when you meet him. I've known him. I had a case, you know, when I was a young lawyer in Mobile when he was U.S. attorney. I mean, he's likable, but he's got no guts. And he buried his head in the sand. And I think what he did, because even 3 Republican congressmen came out and said he should resign. I was the first to advocate that if you're not going to do your job.
Yeah.
He's just letting off some pressure here.
Right.
But 97% of Justice Department lawyers are Clinton and Obama loyalists. They gave to their campaigns. They voted for them. There ain't no way in hell that they're going to take any action against the Clintons.
But you don't think that President Trump might start to, you know, it seems like the first year of his presidency he was really getting his footing and kind of, you know, finding his way, and now maybe he's getting underway. Is there any chance he could eliminate Sessions and bring in someone who actually will do something with the Clintons and their associates?
I think it may come to that eventually, but I've advocated, and others have advocated, the appointment of a special counsel. I've volunteered myself. There's a petition on our website. I urge people to go sign it. There's currently about 12,000 signers.
Give us that website again, if you would,
FreedomWatchUSA.org. FreedomWatch, one word, USA.org. I'll get the job done, and I'm not worried about politics, and I'm not worried about appearance.
And I'm sorry I didn't prepare a graphic for that, but people can go there and support the work.
Yes, please sign that. And it's also a way to, so we can send you materials about what we're doing, you know, through email and otherwise. If you can give us your address, we can send you mailings and things like that, and also updates on our activities.
Let's talk a bit more about Fusion GPS, because that's something that we've been hearing so much about. And me personally, before 2017, I was not aware of these political operative firms. We've got Fusion GPS, we've got Greenberg, Quinlan, Rosner. There are a few of them out there. And in a recent interview that you did, I think maybe on Newsmax, you were talking about how they may in fact be paying journalists to put out stories or cover up stories. That's pretty serious. Let's talk about that for a moment. Fusion GPS and their interference.
Yeah, well,
with...
it's a huge conspiracy. You know, people always accuse people like me of being conspiracy theorists. Well, I don't think that's a pejorative phrase. What is a conspiracy? 2 people acting in concert with an agreement to violate the law. I mean, there are conspiracies every minute of every day. Okay, and when you have the press colluding, talk about collusion, with Hillary Clinton campaign, the Democrats, Special Counsel Mueller, and others who are trying to destroy Trump and his presidency, that's really a super breakdown of our entire system.
They'd be destroying the country is what they'd be doing.
Yeah, and they're doing it. And these people, they're vicious, vicious, vicious people. I mean, just watch CNN, watch MSNBC. They don't really care about the Constitution. They don't care about the vision of our founding fathers. They want to destroy the country, and once they take it to ground zero, this is right out of Atlas Shrugged, they want to build it back up again in their own ultra-leftist image, atheist image, radical feminist image, radical Islamic interest image, and the whole 9 yards. And, you know, we're not that far away from seeing that happen. If Trump fails, this country's going down.
Yeah. How does it even make sense to have a radical feminist and a radical Islamist interest working together? It's so strange. But it's what they're doing.
Let me say this too. You know, you and I are Jewish origin. Okay, I'm Messianic. You're full-fledged. Okay, but our liberal brothers and sisters that are Jewish are being very destructive, in my view. And I don't mean that in an anti-Semitic way, because I'm very proud of my heritage and I'm a Zionist. But I think that you know, they have even sided with CAIR, Council for American Islamic Relations. The Anti-Defamation League, I don't think, they're more interested in destroying Trump than furthering, you know, Jewish people being treated fairly. I've got a story about that. We may not have time, but
We have all the time you want.
no. I mean, I really, I'm embarrassed sometimes. I think the Jewish left is the biggest enemy of the Jewish people.
I think that the people that we're seeing, you know, in the leftist movement, there's just, I feel like so many people are controlled by this mass media message that is totally untrue. And it brings me back to the Bundy case, because in my mind, the most important factor of that case, of course, the family was, in my view, wronged, and that land and everything, you obviously know far more about it than I do, but just the fact that they were not given due process. They could have been committing the most horrendous crimes imaginable there. Doesn't matter. They still get due process.
Now, you got to ask yourself this question. Okay, suppose you owe the IRS a lot of money. That's not a crime to owe them money.
Right, it's a civil matter. That's the other thing.
Right, and Klayman does not owe Bureau of Land Management $1.3 million. That's an inflated sum, and he doesn't owe it in any event, legally,
Right.
in my view.
Right.
But does that give the IRS to bust into your house, to beat up your sister, to tase your sons, to nearly kill your dog and destroy your herd of cattle if you're a rancher? Is that the country
Certainly
we
not.
live in?
Well, apparently it is.
Yeah,
Sadly.
and that's what this was about. And that's why when people asked me to meet Klayman, I really was happy to do that. I mean, I view this, in whatever capacity I have been a lawyer here, and there have been several, as the most important case I've ever been involved in. And I view this as the most demonstrative of why we fought the revolution. And this was a mini revolution. And it's the first time in modern history that people have peacefully used their First Amendment and Second Amendment rights to stand down a tyrannical federal government that's out of control. Whether it's the Bundys, whether it's Donald Trump, or whether it's you. And I can tell you, a lot of our listeners and viewers today, I'm sure, have seen the power of the federal government come down on them.
It's scary, and I'm glad you said that, because I felt that when we were in the room at Brett Whipple's law offices there, and Klayman spoke, and then we had a little conversation with Ryan and Klayman, and you and I spoke there. It is historic. I don't think it's sunk in for most people yet, but I think in part the experiences of 9/11 for some, the Vegas shooting, you know, which many would argue were both staged events designed to terrorize everyone and get us into this fearful little box where we need the government and law enforcement to protect us, so whatever they say we'll do, and it's all okay. And there are a surprising number of people who think that because the media says the Bundys have done something wrong, or their cows are eating the wrong grass, or they owe somebody some money, that they got what they deserve, that they're outlaws, and it's like, that is shocking to me to hear anybody say that. And when I walk into Penn Station in New York City and I see the Army there, or when I go to the Capitol building and I see police in body armor with, you know, automatic weapons, I think back to when I was a little kid, and that's like imagery from, you know, Ronald Reagan's evil empire of the Soviet Union, or, you know, Nazi era Germany with militarized forces walking around among civilians. Doesn't make me feel safer.
No. And, you know, it reminds me, when I was running Judicial Watch, I had two bodyguards. One was a Navy SEAL, and he was always on edge. Okay, it was like a Doberman pincer. I was more afraid of him than I was of the Clintons. So, you know, and I respect law enforcement, and in fact, I represent a really brave, patriotic guy by the name of Demetric Penny, African-American, who's become my good friend. And he brought lawsuits against Black Lives Matter, Louis Farrakhan, the Nation of Islam, Al Sharpton in Dallas over that massacre. His brothers were massacred and he was assaulted. And he stood up and he got all these death threats. He was called all kinds of names by you know, people in the radical black separatist community. He has a doctorate from Texas A&M in this. He wrote a thesis about it. Super bright guy. And he's a real patriot. He's like a David Clark who actually did something.
Right.
Okay? David Clark's really good rhetorically, but Demetric put his money where his mouth is. Okay?
Yeah.
And I like David Clark too, so I don't mean that negatively, but Demetric is a prince of a guy, and you know, I'm supportive of law enforcement, but not this kind of law enforcement. This is corrupt.
Yeah, yeah. There needs to be a balance for sure. I mean, there's so much for us to talk about, Larry. I'm sensitive to your time here.
Yeah.
So I definitely.
Well, you're a really good interviewer, so you're motivating me.
Thank you, and you're a fascinating guy, and definitely what you're doing is historic, and I know we're going to see more from the Bundys. I just want to ask you briefly about the recent reports that Huma Abedin and Anthony Weiner are postponing their divorce, and I mean, I'm sure you would agree with the supposition that that's to prevent them from testifying against each other as this.
It would have to be, and I don't mean this in a scandalous way, but I mean, Huma Abedin is the girlfriend of Hillary Clinton. I mean, I don't think she has much interest in Anthony Weiner, frankly.
Well, I've said this in the past, and people, I think, took it the wrong way. But in my mind, it is very unusual for a devout Wahhabi Muslim woman, under any circumstance, to marry a Jewish man. And these are two faiths that really place a lot of value on marrying within the faith, and it's a marriage that didn't make a lot of sense to me from the beginning, except if it were a super deep cover
marriage of convenience, much like Bill and Hillary Clinton.
I think it's a deep cover sheep dipping operation, an intelligence operation to cover their true ties to the Muslim Brotherhood.
I believe you're right. Okay, but it's also well known that Huma Abedin shared the sleeping compartment in Hillary Clinton's campaign. I don't mean that. I'm not homophobic, okay, but the reality is the two of them are significant others, okay? So to go back to Anthony Weiner, it's a sham of a sham of a sham, as Woody Allen would say.
Right. And we've heard from sources that have seen contents of the Weiner laptop that there's very damning evidence on there. It seems like it's been very difficult to get that evidence to come out, the seized laptop.
Well, and this is what I'm talking about, you know, is that these cases were before the judges in the D.C. federal court for years. And these Democrat judges in particular slow-rolled these cases. Even the one time that Judicial Watch was able to ask questions of Hillary Clinton, and I intervened in that case too. I had my own parallel case. Judge Sullivan, he would not let us take the deposition of Hillary Clinton. You have to answer questions. So he answered the questions. David Kendall of Williams & Conley, the law firm for Hillary. She didn't answer one question. And it was all, I don't remember, or whatever. The great thing I remember in the 90s that the Clintons would always say, and the people around them, I have no specific recollection, which means I have recollection, but I just can't remember now.
Almost everything they say is such legal gerrymandering of the truth, right?
Right.
When Hillary said, I didn't send or receive classified information on my email, I take that to mean that she typed it up, hit attach, left it in the drafts folder, and then said, hey, Huma, come here, and hit send.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, these documents are coming out now, but, you know, unless there's a special counsel, and again, I'm available, go to freedomwatchusa.org. Unless there's special counsel, don't expect anything to happen.
Yeah.
Not inside this Justice Department. It's corrupt to the core.
And so when will you know if your lawsuit to get Mueller pushed out will be gaining traction?
Well, I'm accelerating it. It's up at the D.C. Circuit now. I'm confident it'll be sent back. And I have other lawsuits on the horizon that we can talk about next time. I'm not done with Mueller. I've got some really good stuff coming up.
And is there anything that the people in the crowdsource community can do to help write petitions to the Justice Department, the judges, anything? Sign the petition, of course.
Sign our petition because, you know, I know that President Trump follows what I do. I know the people in the White House. I know Kellyanne Conway. Her name was Fitzpatrick before. And Steve Miller, you know, went to Duke, and he worked for Michelle Bachmann, who's my friend. And there are a lot of people in there. Mike Huckabee, his daughter rather, is. So, and I send stuff over there so they know what I'm doing, and I see it come out. For instance, the president just the other day said, I don't feel like being interviewed by Mueller. I wouldn't be interviewed by him. It's a trap.
Of course.
It's a perjury trap. And I had advocated that, and Alan Dershowitz, interestingly enough, had advocated that too. We're the only two that said just don't do it as a criminal defense lawyer. So I know that they see it. So sign that petition. The president's aware of it. And maybe by the grace of God, just like he came to the defense of the Bundys, maybe lightning will strike and maybe I will be named special counsel.
I think it would be excellent. And we've got to get you on Sunday at Charles so that you and Charles Ortel can kind of put your heads together on some of the
Love
things.
to.
Because you guys have both been doing amazing work. Larry, it's been a pleasure. I really have to thank you for your
Jason.
time.
Thank you. You're a patriot, my friend.
As are you, sir. A true American hero and a legend. I want to thank everyone for watching, and I will see you soon. Don't forget to go to Freedom Watch USA.
.org.
There you go. And support what they're doing here financially, with petitions, whatever you can. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.